us, and we shouldn't have done such things. It wasn't our duty to use force to change something. It was clear in the Sharia, but as youth, we used to skip that and make our own decision.
The next day, Muntasir al-Zayat invited me to meet the rest of his family. They were going for a boat ride on the Nile. I was honored that I had won his trust, especially with the fully veiled women in his family. This is very unusual. Al-Zayat maintains that he was never a very violent man, just misdirected. Automatic weapons make him nervous.
I can say that apart from training how to use weapons, I didn't really participate in violent incidents. That's why the accusations against me during the jihad case were based on the grounds of spreading thoughts of violence, not physically perpetrating it. In jail, we realized that a peaceful call to Islam was the best way to attract and convince people of our doings, instead of threatening and forcing our views on them. We faced a lot of problems among our fellow prisoners, and it wasn't an easy transformation.
What had changed Muntasir was a combination of his jail time, what he called his accumulated unpleasant experiences, and a deeper understanding of Islam.
I called upon the historical leaders of the groups, the ones who were in jail and those who were abroad, including Ayman Zawahiri, to stop all military actions against the Egyptian government. The first reaction to my call came from Zawahiri himself. He said, "Fear God, Muntasir, and don't break the will of the Mujahideen." My life was under threat, and I could have been killed, but I never hesitated. I chose to continue.
For many years now, Muntasir al-Zayat has defended radical Islamists in the Egyptian courts. He tries to dissuade them from their extremism, remembering how important such guidance would have been for him when he was young.
I defend these people because I understand their motives and their reasons and why they sometimes use violence. I was one of them. I never deny them. The easier way would be to totally abandon them and start a new life. But I managed over 20 years to change the concept of Islamic groups from violence to peaceful means.
The next day before I left Aswan, we went to Friday prayers. By now I was convinced of Muntasir's sincerity. He is a positive role model, an Islamist who believes in moderation and in dialogue. The government should embrace him and take his advice. So should more Islamists. Unlike so many Egyptians who never take any action, he is a man of continued action.
I believe that Islam wins more by peace and not by war. We lost with violence. Every time an Islamic group used violence, it ended up losing public support. One of the most important errors that occurred in the 70s and 80s is that we were lured into violence and we fell into that trap. If we can go back in time, we would definitely act differently. It would be a good thing today if we could lead the youth towards a moderate Islam. I think this would prevent the cycle of violence. The problem is definitely in people's understanding of Islam and not in Islam. Islam is a peaceful religion, an international religion, a religion that calls on its followers to be open to other religions, whether Muslims, Christians, or Jews. We were young students who didn't find the role model to direct us. We taught ourselves, set the rules, and executed the verdicts. No, that was wrong.
In 2007, I contacted Mansour al-Naqidan and told him that I wanted to come visit again. He seemed more welcoming than the first time we talked. He told me that he was no longer living in Saudi Arabia, but in the United Arab Emirates, in a small city called Ajman, about an hour north of Dubai. It looks just like Saudi Arabia here, a lot of boring cement buildings, but it has a really nice beach. Mansour goes walking here every day, and this is where we agreed to meet. I was there first, and he called me from his mobile phone, and he said he could see me in the distance, but I couldn't see him. I had a distinct image of him in my mind from when we first met in the hotel in Riyadh. Then I was shocked to see him in shorts, t-shirts, and sandals. A very Western look. He had changed dramatically.
Life in the Emirates is much more normal than in Saudi. I can spend time with my wife and baby outdoors without being chased for holding her hand, something that I was once questioned for in Riyadh. The simplest daily practices have become very difficult. I used to live next to the zoo in Riyadh and still couldn't take my family there because men are not allowed to mix with women. Matters have developed even worse lately. I was told that the religious police deploy in the zoo during visiting hours for women to prevent them from watching animals having sex. This is outrageous and unbearable. Civil life during Prophet Muhammad's years was not as strict as it is now in Saudi. Women had more freedom. Nothing of the current restrictions is related to Islam, not even to the Wahhabism doctrine. It can only be described as a social illness that needs remedies.
This conversation had a different feel to it. As he spoke of more freedom for women, I felt he was being honest and sincere.
I crave for the day my country would present a bright model of true Islam, based on accepting others, forgiveness, understanding, and grasping of modern civilization.
He told me that he could speak more freely now that he was outside of Saudi Arabia, and he held nothing back in his anger towards his country.
I trust neither religious clerics nor politicians. They have proven to be the biggest liars in human history. Clerics abuse religion to serve political interests and have caused a lot of damage to humanity. The world will be a better place without religious clerics. Sadly, fanatic practices take place under government protection as long as it doesn't touch the affairs of rulership. I have a feeling the government is using fanatics as a shield and spear at the same time.
He said he wanted to talk more, but it was time for dinner, so we went back to his apartment. He wanted to introduce me to his wife and his one-year-old son. Just as when Muntasir introduced me to his veiled wife in Aswan, this was a lot of trust Mansour was putting in me. And his wife was willing to be interviewed in English. She has studied in the United States to be a doctor of community medicine. Theirs was an arranged marriage, but she says she had the opportunity to say no to the arrangement.
I had the choice to reject or to approve this marriage. approve him, the groom, I mean. After I met him, I was very sure that this is the man I want to marry. My family were a little hesitant because of Mansour's past, but when they saw me insisting on marrying Mansour, then they also agreed, and they were hoping that he'll be a nice guy, and he turned to be a nice one. Before he tells me anything, I did my own small research. I read his articles, and I read all the rumors were spreading about him on the internet. After that, I made up my mind.
Mansour today remains an outcast. He continues to write, but not for Saudi outlets from which he is banned. His byline still appears infrequently in Western newspapers. He remains a reflective man who, I am convinced, has gone through a true intellectual and spiritual transformation.
Emotionally, I was disturbed with what I went through in Saudi. I was uncomfortable feeling targeted just for thinking differently. I was looked upon as being unloyal and disruptive. This originated from my writing over the past 2 years, that it is unfair to be critical about Muslim fundamentalists and no one else.
Son. Hey.
Over the course of an hour and a half, free of the tension of living in Saudi, free of the threats against his life, he denounced violence and extremism.
وبالتالي لا يمكن أن يقبل فيها أنصاف الحلول.
When consecutive generations are raised on fanatic ideologies, extremism becomes almost inevitable. Over the past 50 to 60 years, many were raised on unilateral beliefs that recognizes no other ideas or interpretations. Expectedly, rifts started to divide society members. With no bridges of dialogue or understanding, many resorted to violence. Simultaneously, scholars contributed to the problem. Whenever the governments